Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 66 of the Game Plan podcast by College Baseball Advisors. On the Game Plan, we talk everything from high school, college, minor league, and pro baseball, people's development process, coaches' journeys, and of course, the recruiting process. I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni. My background is 30 years as a college baseball coach, coached at Nova Southeastern, Post University, Fairfield University, Holy Cross, and Sacred Heart, and I am now a recruiting advisor for College Baseball Advisors. For more information about what I do, please visit my website, collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's episode, we have Craig Hanson, head baseball coach at Dickinson College. Love this guy, love his personality, love his coaching style. We had a couple of glitches on the Zoom, but as I went back and reviewed it, all looks like it came out pretty smooth. Hopefully, it comes across that way as well. Craig, a great story. Both parents in higher education, moved around a little bit. Younger in life, started and was born in actually New Hampshire, but then was raised up till third grade in Southern California. Then moved to Middlebury, Vermont. One of his parents worked at Middlebury, the other at Dartmouth. Craig actually played football and baseball in high school and football and baseball at Middlebury College. And then after graduation, and actually he discusses in the J term, which is that January term in college, he actually did an internship in baseball operations with Stanford baseball program. So after college, he spent a year working for Stanford in baseball operations before he then got a job at Davidson. Interestingly enough, his brother was on the team at Davidson, knew that there was an opening, and connected Craig to the coach, and he started his on-field coaching career at Davidson. And then at the young, ripe age of 25, interviewed for the Dickinson job and got it, and he's been there now going in 20 years. So we talked a lot about that journey, about being a coach, the culture, Dickinson College in general. I went to Gettysburg, very similar school. I'm a big fan of those types of schools. We talked about his baseball program, the recruiting process, and then kind of characteristics learned that, ultimately help you succeed wherever you wind up going to college. I'd like to remind you that this episode is made possible through the sponsorship of the World Baseball Coaches Convention, which is now less than a month away. It takes place January 15th to 17th at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. This event has been going on for 22. This will be the 23rd year. I've been to almost all of them. It is just a great venue. It is a great convention with great speakers, even the people in the audience, high school, college, minor league, pro coaches. It's a great environment. The vendors are really first class. There's a batting cage demo. There's an infield demo. So it's just a great event. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I highly suggest you check out this event. Go to their website, baseballcoachesclinic.com, to learn more. And without further delay, here's my conversation with Craig Hanson, head baseball coach at Dickinson College. All right, Craig, I'm pumped to be here with you. We've known each other quite a while. We'll actually maybe talk about that as when we first met. I remember when we first met. You may not remember when we first met, but as we were saying before I hit the record button, I mean, I knew you're a Vermont guy. What I didn't know, as you were saying, is you were born and spent the beginning part of your life in California.
So actually, born in Hanover, New Hampshire. I'm a
Okay.
child of two parents who were involved in higher education, and so my path kind of followed their career path. They were both working at Dartmouth College, which is where they met. And so I was born in Hanover, and when I was 3 years old, moved to Southern California so my mom could get her doctorate at UCLA. Dad worked at USC at the time, so was there until roughly third grade. And my grandparents lived out there. My mom grew up in Southern California, so spent some early time in prime baseball territory before moving back to Vermont eventually, in third grade, where my parents got jobs at Middlebury College and Dartmouth, respectively.
So do you remember that growing up time in Cali?
I do, and it was mostly sports related. The weather was beautiful year round, so a lot of little league baseball, and we probably played 50 or 60 games a year with the regular season and all stars and things like that. So it was very baseball heavy. But loved my time out there. Grandparents in the stands, going to games, and my younger brother tagging along and playing whatever I was playing. So it was a good memory. And then moving back to Vermont, obviously, a little different with the seasons and a little bit less of baseball and more some other sports. But I respect my parents and the path they took to get where they were, and both were very successful within their professions in higher education. And so I was, just sort of happy to be where they were.
Do you do you remember at all kicking and screaming going from California to Vermont, or were you fine with it, or is it too long ago?
I think if I had known what Vermont was as far as weather, it would have been a little bit more of a uphill battle. But no, Middlebury was great, and having the seasons was something I wasn't used to. Obviously, the baseball, being year round in California, I had some teammates that went on and played professionally and did some pretty cool things that were little league teammates. But it's been I don't think I would be where I am now if I didn't have the experience of moving to Vermont. So.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it come across that I don't like. To me, the New England area, upstate New York, is my happy place. But it is a culture shock going from Southern California to Vermont, right? For
It
sure.
was. We probably played 8 to 10 games every spring, and the spring didn't start until May, and so the seasons were a little bit shorter. But I was able to pick up on some other sports, and really enjoyed my youth growing up in that area, and lived in a neighborhood with probably 15 other kids within a 5 year age range, and just outside playing from the time it got light in the morning till the sun went down at night.
And so, were the parents in administration or teachers, professors?
So in administration, my mom was the dean of students at Middlebury College. When we moved back, my dad was commuting actually to Dartmouth every day. He had worked in the dean's office at Dartmouth. That's where they both met. And then he ended up going back to Middlebury and getting the job as the director of admissions at Middlebury. And so, we joked that my dad would, open the front door, my mom would kick him out the back. But yeah, just grew up as a college, little rugrat, running around and playing football in the end zones, outside of the football stadium, and going to baseball games, and living in the field house, during the winter, shooting hoops and doing all that stuff.
So my last podcast, which was actually yesterday, had Matt Midkiff, who you probably know from Swarthmore, and he was the rare guy that talked about he literally did nothing but play baseball, meaning he didn't play any other sports in any organized fashion. Obviously, you alluded to it, but I know you went on to also play football and baseball at Middlebury. But in that formative years, the junior high years, etc., you were playing all kinds of sports.
Did everything. So baseball every spring, played Legion ball in the summer, through high school, but basketball in the winters. Actually played soccer until I was probably a freshman in high school, and then
Mm.
sophomore year in high school, kind of looked around and realized that I was, taller and bigger than most of these kids on the soccer field, and made the transition to football, which I really enjoyed playing, throughout high school, and in my prep year, and then at Middlebury College. And so I think sports specialization works for some, but I can't imagine not having played multiple sports as long as I could, and including college. And that was one of the deciding factors of going the Division III route versus taking advantage of Division I opportunities that I had just to play baseball.
So obviously now with both of your parents in higher education, and being at those two great schools, I would imagine you getting your studies done and your academics was a big priority in the Hanson household.
Yes, that went without saying. Had to come home right away and do the work. And I think the prep year especially helped me develop study skills. High school for me was relatively easy, didn't require a ton of work to do well. But I think if I had gone straight from Middlebury High School to Middlebury College, it would have been a little rude of awakening. So that year where I was learning, okay, hey, maybe I got to do some studying during the day, devote some time at night, really gave me a good base for my academic career, in college. But yeah, it was always, understood that, grades came first, and school came first before we could go out and shoot hoops or do whatever we had planned for that afternoon.
Where did you do that prep year?
So I went to the Lawrenceville School, just outside of Princeton, New Jersey. And so I graduated Middlebury High School in 98, and then played football and baseball at Lawrenceville in 98, 99, and had a great experience there. Played for 𝐾𝐨, who was a legendary football coach in New Jersey. We were, I think, the last team in the country running the single wing. And so that was, a treat. And then I think, we had probably 23-3 in baseball that year,
Mm.
and won some county championships and things like that. So, but I think just the year away from home, giving me some perspective. If you had asked me straight out of high school, am I going to go back to Middlebury, Vermont, and spend my 4 years there for college? No way. But a year away gave me some perspective, and I said, this is an opportunity to play both. And so I was weighing, both versus one, and at some Division I opportunities. But at the end of the day, decided, hey, if I'm going to go Division III, Middlebury is as good a place as any, and it was going to allow me to do both, and get a great education, and be close enough to my parents that we had some boundaries, but they were able to make it to all my games, and were really supportive during that time.
Do you remember that being a tough call to go to Middlebury, playing both and giving up what? And I'm assuming was it the baseball D1 opportunities
Yeah,
or
so
football? It was
I had some
baseball.
opportunities for baseball Division One, and honestly, I was so late to football that I never really considered playing in college, but
Right.
had a decent enough high school career and in the prep year that I did have some options open to me, and so I was probably back on fourth between Middlebury and Dartmouth actually for if you had asked me on one day, it would have been a different answer every day for probably a month and a half until finally I just realized, hey, I want to do both. I don't want to give up on one, and so that made the decision a little bit easier.
And was it kind of common sense that it was those two schools you were looking at because that's where your parents worked?
So yes, Duke was in the mix for a little while, and I had an opportunity to go there. And then Coach Traylor left Duke to go to Wofford, and so there was a little bit of uncertainty, going to Duke and whether or not I'd have an opportunity there. And baseball was important enough to me that I definitely wanted to play, and so ended up, making the decision that hey, a bird in the hand, right? And so I knew I could play at Middlebury or Dartmouth, and then I could also play football at Middlebury, and so that made the decision a little bit easier.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. As we look back on it now, you played 2 years of football at Middlebury and 4 years of baseball.
Correct. Yep. So I'll never forget. It was after our last game of the spring season for baseball at Middlebury. My dad had come to Amherst to watch the games and asked if I could ride home with him, and he actually told me on the ride home that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And
Mm.
so through the conversation with him and in a couple of weeks of just sort of reflection and decision making, I was not a very good football player in college. I was doing what I needed to do to provide looks on the scout offense and things like that, but I didn't have much of a future in that. And I figured with my dad having those medical issues, spending as much time with him as I possibly could over the summer and fall was just a natural decision. And so, don't regret it. Obviously I love my teammates and my coaches at football but the decision to spend the time and take the fall off and spend more time with my dad and family was the right one. And he's doing well today at the age of 88. And so, I look back and those were times that I remember, finally just those one-on-one hours with him.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And obviously, family comes first. Your career and mine mirror each other in college. I went to Gettysburg to, with the intention of playing both. Played football my first year, and got the crap beat out of me on the scout team, and then wound up sticking with baseball. But like part of me, a small part of me, looks back and says, if I had stuck with football by junior and senior year, I would have been a starter because the comparable friends I played with that only played football and stuck with it do you look back and say it's a no-brainer I stopped, or is there a piece of you that goes, man, I would have liked to have played those extra couple of years?
I think I probably would have had the opportunity if I had stuck with it. But the lessons and the friendships, and I think playing multiple sports, I think is awesome. And you learn things and toughness in football that you don't get from other sports. And this time of year, starting practice when it's dark out, finishing practice when it's dark out, not knowing what time it is, not very warm up in Vermont this time of year, and so some long cold practices. But I think that gives you some perspective and gives you sort of a mentality that you can approach, other things in life, including baseball. And so for me, it was, one that I look back and yeah, it might have been different. I might have had a better, football career had I stuck with it longer. But at the same time, I think, the decisions that I made brought me here, and I appreciate that.
In terms of your baseball career, at any point playing there, did you entertain or thought you had the possibility to play after college, or were you realizing, hey, this is going to be too long of a battle?
I thought, I think offensively, I was definitely a better hitter than I was a defensive player. I was first base DH type. I actually pitched a little bit in college as well and filled in as necessary. And I had some arm strength. Probably more of a thrower than a pitcher. Now as a coach, I have a little bit more perspective and can diagnose my ability. But I thought the bat might have played. But I wasn't, an agile middle infielder who could, spin it and chuck it across the diamond. So I think my career probably ended when it should have. And, I think one of the reasons I got into coaching is just needing that competitive outlet after I graduated and, having been an athlete my entire life and competing in everything I did, whether it was with my little brother or my teammates or buddies from high school, um, just wanting to continue to have that competitive outlet. And I thought, at the time, when I graduated, I figured, to be a coach, you got to teach and coach in high school. And that was kind of the route I was prepping for. And I had some, applications out and some interviews for some prep school jobs, which would have allowed me to continue coaching. But by way of Middlebury, we had a January term. So we had a sort of a fall and then a spring and then a mini mester in between where you could go off campus and do some internships. And in my senior year at Middlebury, I actually got hooked up with the Stanford baseball team, and so I was out there as the director of baseball ops. Following, my graduation, which was, an opportunity that was awarded to me from my experience there my senior year. So the ability to coach without having to teach was one that I really appreciated, and that kind of led me to where I am today.
So that's really interesting. So you kind of knew all along some aspect in some area of coaching is what you wanted to do, right?
Definitely. And the
Yeah. And
teaching aspect would have been, sort of this is, the steps I need to take to be able to coach is, maybe I've got to teach a world geography class or a religion class in order to coach. And I'm sure I would have enjoyed doing that and interacted with the students, but, coaching was what I was most passionate about. So finding an opportunity to do that, was awesome.
so and then if I heard you right, you're saying basically during a J term at Middlebury, you get the Stanford ops set up.
Yeah. So again, thanks to my
Wow.
parents who have had a ton of connections over the years. My mom was a Stanford alum. My dad was in the dean's office at Stanford. Actually, when my mom was an undergrad, didn't know each other at all. But my dad knew some folks in the athletics office, and so made a connection with Coach Marquis, and basically said, I've got a month where I can come out and do anything you need me to. And so that month I went out, and in the mornings I was looking at emails and printing them off, and putting them in folders and organizing recruiting stuff, reaching out to high schools, obtaining transcripts. Then I'd go set up the field, and I would hit fungos or feed the machines, or whatever they needed me to do at practice. And then during the games, I was charting whatever stats they needed me to chart, and reporting back. And so essentially just trial by fire, and getting my feet wet, and thankful to Coach Marquis and Coach Stotts, who were super important in this journey, and allowing me that first opportunity, which has led to kind of everything else that's followed.
So after graduation, now you go back there, is that correct?
Yep.
You basically pick up where you left off, if you
Yep,
will.
graduated, and the day after graduation, flew to Omaha. We Stanford team made it to Omaha that year. We ended up losing the national championship series to a very talented Rice team that had four pitchers drafted in the first round that year. It
Wow,
was
goodness
Neiman,
gracious.
Townsend, Umber, and 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐷 were all first rounders, and we lost in the national championship game. And then flew from Omaha out to California, where I helped Coach Stotts running youth camps all summer long, and
I
prospecting.
know Stotts. Yeah, yeah, that guy
Yep.
worked. That guy's the king of camps, or was the king of camps, right?
He
Yeah.
is, and again, kind of just gave me as much responsibility as I could have ever wanted. And then once the kids came back, in the fall, we transitioned to more recruiting, office work, again, assisting on the field, helping those guys, and just the culture shock of going out there and seeing guys that I've been watching on TV. Who had been, All Americans, first round draft picks at a high school, who decided to go to college, and who ended up having great, major league careers, and now are, some of them will be Hall of Famers, and other guys are in front offices. It's been really fun to see the game at such a high level, and just watch them operate.
Um, that place, Stanford, to me, epitomizes excellence. I mean, there are three or four universities in this country. I mean, there's many great institutions, but Stanford, athletically, their facilities, what they have as a setup there. I mean, it's incredible. So that must have been a heck of an experience to be where a place where excellence is pursued.
It was unbelievable. And, just the short walk every day from the baseball offices to Sunken Diamond, I'm walking past, the swimming pool, which has the entire relay team from the U.S. Olympics. Jerry Rice is practicing on the practice football field with Doug Baldwin and the Stanford alums who are in the NFL. Half the guys on the team are dating, Olympians. It's just, there's excellence everywhere you look. And even the non-athletes are winning Nobel Prizes, and doing unbelievable things outside of athletics. And so super inspiring. It's kind of one of those, eye-opening moments where you're just like, this is a truly, truly special place. And everywhere you look, are just people that are at the top, 1% in whatever field they chose.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few other places that we know of. There's Duke, there's Michigan, Notre Dame, but like to me, in terms of balance of academics and athletics, Stanford might be the number one place that has, the highest on both sides combined. And interestingly enough, now in 2025 or almost in 2026, everyone's got baseball ops now. But back then, there was not a ton of baseball ops jobs. So that's a really great intro into the college baseball world.
it was great, and obviously, paid my dues. I want to say I made 3 grand that year. And again, thanks to my parents who basically said, "Hey, this is the equivalent of you getting a master's in coaching, and you're going to go out there, you're going to learn from the best, and we're willing to invest in you and what it takes to get you on your feet." And like I said, I don't think without that opportunity that
A little tech glitch there, but basically we're saying, which is really accurate, that your parents were smart to say this job at Stanford is the equivalent of a master's in coaching. So, which it really was, especially at that institution. So, and what a great start into a college coaching career, right?
no, it was unbelievable. And Coach Marquis and Coach Stotts were instrumental in that. And just saying, hey, what do you want to get out of this? And I said, I want to be a baseball coach at the highest level I possibly can, and I learn as much as I can during my time here. And so, whether it was the recruiting side of things, the player development side of things, the on field practice things, the charting. I was in the dugout charting pitches electronically on basically a modified Palm Pilot for all of our games, and then they're taking those pitch reports and they're going back and incorporating those into the upcoming scouting reports. And so just giving me all the responsibility that I could handle. But as far as the trial by fire goes, it was everything I could have possibly wanted, and absolutely prepared me well for this opportunity now, and for kind of everything that's followed.
You were ultimately there how many years?
A year and a half. So I was there for the tail end. So the first month was the sort of January of the 24 season, then followed up in Omaha, and then excuse me, the 23 season. Then was there for all of 2024. We were the number one team in the country for the most of the year. Ended up Long Beach State ended up as the 2 seed in our regional. They were going to host it and kind of hit a skid towards the end of the year. Played their way out of hosting, so they showed up in Palo Alto with Jared Weaver, Evan Longoria. You know, Jason Vargas, Troy Tulowitzki. It was a pretty talented team, and they knocked us off in the regional in advance. So our year was cut short a little bit, but yeah, they took 23 and 24,
You
went to
mean you
Omaha and
mean
showed
oh
them.
03 and oh 04?
Yeah, excuse me, 03 and 04. Yeah,
Right, exactly.
sorry,
Yeah.
showing
No.
my age a little bit. Yeah.
So from there, after that, you get an opportunity at Davidson, correct?
Yep. So I was working camp at Stanford in the summer of '04, and actually my younger brother gave me a call and said, "Hey, our assistant coach is leaving and is taking another position elsewhere. Our second assistant coach position is open. Would you have any interest?" And I said, "Well, that depends on you." I said, "This is going to be your senior year of college. Do you want me to be a part of your college baseball experience?" And he was a pitcher. He had walked on to Davidson, and we saw limited innings, and I wasn't going to be the pitching coach, and so I wasn't going to be making decisions about my brother, and so he gave me the green light, and so I had a couple of good conversations with Coach Cook, and he
Boom.
sure.
And I'm gonna actually a glitch, but I wanted to interrupt you anyway first. Your brother played there, I had no idea.
Yeah, so brother was a walk on. Was just a left-handed pitcher. He also went to Lawrenceville, did 2 years at Lawrenceville. Had a very good senior year, but was a low 80s lefty who mixed a little bit. And I think Davidson had a lot of power righties, and needed a guy who could come in and get a lefty or two out in the middle of the lineup. And he threw strikes and he mixed well. And so, he was on the team, and again, gave me the green light, and I appreciate him for doing that, because if he had said, "Hey, I want my own experience to be my own experience," I totally would have understood that. But he was awesome, and basically said, not only do I want you here, it's going to make my experience better. And I hadn't had a chance to watch him play at all, really, because I had been out in California
Right.
in my own stuff. And so I really enjoyed the year we spent together, and the ability to be in the dugout with him.
And it was, I mean, I'm trying to think back in that time frame if these jobs were public on the internet was just up and coming. So it was obviously the fact that he was there and knowing that a job came open was a nice hookup by your brother too.
Absolutely. It wasn't anything that I had seen publicized, and I was content on staying at Stanford for another year. That opportunity would have been open to me, and but at the same time, I wanted to stop relying on my parents, and make a little bit of money on my own. And so, the move made sense to me at the time, and again, getting to work with high academic young men, and at a place that valued academics and athletics. The whole Davidson versus Goliath mentality with just a lack of scholarships and the high academic standards in the Southern Conference at Davidson we weren't allowed to bring kids to campus that were getting full rides elsewhere, and so that provided a little bit of a challenge, but also made us, get creative with the type of guys we were looking at. And so was really fun to kind of do more with less.
And you stayed there for how many years?
So I was there for 2 years. I was there for all of '05, and then after '05, our number one assistant coach actually took a head job at a Division II school. So I got bumped up to the number one spot and was head of recruiting as a 25-year-old, 24-year-old. And so that was a great responsibility in itself, and getting to work hand in hand with Coach Cook as far as who we were bringing in. But yeah, again, just sort of right place, right time, thrown into the fire, and really enjoyed my time there.
So the years that you were there were what? Starting and finishing.
'05, '06.
Oh five, oh six. And then it was right to Dickinson, correct?
Yeah. So again, I get a phone call in the spring of '06. It's a biology professor at Dickinson named Mike Roberts. His son Brian Roberts was a teammate with me at Middlebury, and Mike had known that I was in the coaching field, and the head coach here at Dickinson was about to announce that he was leaving. His wife was going into law school up in New York, and so there was an opening, and he said, I think you should apply, and kind of nurtured me through that process, and said, hey, definitely get your application in. So I did, and came up, and I thought, at the age of 25, this is gonna be a great opportunity just to interview, and to gain some experience with the process, and kind of go through it, and see what that might look like. And I went up. Apparently, I did an all right job. I was offered the job, and then a week later, I was packing my stuff, and getting ready to move up here.
So it is pretty funny because, I obviously know you now as an adult. You got the gray, you're an adult male. This job is easy. But boy, dude, that's a huge undertaking at the age you're at that university. I mean, so was the learning, let's put it this way. Obviously they thought you were qualified for the job and you were, but did you get the job and go, oh boy, there's a lot to be done around here, you
Yeah,
know?
and again, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And the
Right.
learning continues. And so, looking back, I wish I would have been a better coach in those first couple of years, because those guys deserved, the best coach they could have had. And I'm still learning and reading and growing and trying to be a better version of myself. But we've come a long way for sure. And I was fortunate early in the years to have that mentorship, whether it was Coach Marcus, Coach Stotts, Coach Cook, other coaches in the league. Bill Walkenbach's a good friend of mine who was at F&M at the time. And when I was offered the job, I called him and said, hey, what do you think? Can you win there? What are the challenges? What are the advantages? And so I was always able to have people in my corner that I was able to go to for advice. And I, appreciate those guys incredibly. And so, having those resources available to me, it's been a whirlwind. But looking back now, this will be year 20 for me here. and
Right, exactly.
um, and so what we've accomplished in 20 years, from a winning standpoint, from a facility standpoint, from a player experience standpoint, it all is super rewarding, and kind of surreal to look back and to remember, okay, we used to practice in the basketball arena at 11 o'clock at night, or 6 o'clock in the morning. And now we've got a dedicated baseball facility that we can go into whenever we want, and our guys can come down and work whenever they need to.
So I do want to get into all that stuff for sure, but I do one more question about when you first got the job was, did you recall the being a head coach from an administrative, all these are all the things I have to do, or was it, hey, I got to run a team on a field and all the different aspects? Were they both equally challenging, or was one harder than the other?
At the time, I wish I had known that probably only 10% of what I do is baseball related. Everything else, with the budgets and the fundraising, the academic advising and the recruiting. I was essentially, we joked that the business card could have been, twice as big and two-sided, with all the responsibilities at our
Right, right.
level. I'm the dean of baseball. I'm the dean of, academic advising, all that stuff that goes into it, making sure your guys are happy, and working hard. And there's a lot more than just going out there and hitting a fungo and throwing batting practice. But I think you have to kind of lean into that, and really embrace getting to know your guys as well-rounded young men. And we talk a lot about the college time is a time that they're going to learn and develop, and that learning isn't just history and econ. It's what kind of person do you want to be? What are your values? How do you act on a Saturday night? Are you responsible to your teammates and to your parents and to the coaching staff? And so you're getting into all this stuff, and it all is valuable, because if your guys aren't doing what they need to do in the classroom or elsewhere, they're not going to be on the field for you. And so, I think I learned a lot, especially in those first couple of years. There were some challenges for sure, and trying to create a championship culture and a culture that put the emphasis on doing things the right way at all times. And there was some pushback and some tough decisions along the way, but I think that just kind of led us to where we are now. And the leadership we currently have with our student athletes has been tremendous, and they kind of self-police now, which is nice.
Which is great. I know Dickinson really well. Obviously, I went to Gettysburg, and I'm a huge fan of those similar institutions. I know the arrivals, but Franklin and Marshall and Muhlenberg. I mean, it's just I think have things such a great experience. But let's get specific on Dickinson. Can you tell people who've never been to campus, don't know much about it, about the university first, and then we'll get into your baseball program.
Yeah, no, established in 1783, the first college established after the formation of the United States. And then, roughly 2,100 kids, 46 majors, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, about 25,000 people. It's a great little college town and a great
It is.
marriage of the town and the college. And both, the fans come out for sports, and the college, promotes the town and allows, them opportunities to use facilities and things like that. Um, we've got an unbelievable study abroad opportunity. 65% of the students on campus will study abroad at some point,
Oh,
including 60% of the athletes. So
wow.
there are over 50 countries that you can go and get a Dickinson education. And so, we currently have 4 athletes that are abroad studying in Bologna, Italy, that come back to the States, next week, but have been abroad all semester. And we've had kids abroad every year that I've been here, with the exception of the COVID years. And so it's a big part of what we do. I would say our most popular major amongst our team is international business and management. And so there is that international component. And so, it may sound weird to hear a baseball coach saying, hey, go study abroad, but when else in your life are you going to be able to go and completely immerse yourself in a different culture, learn the language, and just kind of get that experience? We Zoom with our guys every week that are abroad, and it's, hey, how was last week? And I was, oh, we were in Austria, we went to Switzerland, we did, we went to Germany or Morocco. And so, they're having experiences that they never would have been afforded otherwise. And so the growth we see from those guys, from a maturity standpoint and just a life, standpoint, it's been really rewarding to see. And so that's a big part of what we do here. But, we've got a top 5 business program for liberal arts colleges in the country. And I think a lot of the things you see from Dickinson are just results. And our guys go on to do great things after they graduate. And so we've got an incredibly strong alumni network. And I tell recruits, this isn't a 4-year decision. This is a 40-year decision. And, the opportunities afforded to you from being a Dickinson baseball player are going to help you, get jobs at that next level. And, we've got a very active LinkedIn page with Dickinson baseball alums. And we've got alums coming back to campus that are mentoring our current athletes that are available for phone calls and interviews and internships. And so, the guys that our guys are sitting next to in the dugout or on the bus are going to be the same guys standing next to them on their wedding day. And I've been around long enough that I'm probably averaging 5 or 6 weddings a year. And so,
Right.
I can say that from a point of fact. And so it's a wonderful place. And I appreciate, the young men that I have the privilege of working with there. I don't want to bury the lead. They're the best part of what we have here is the guys that come through the doors and put on the uniforms for us. And my interaction with them is incredibly rewarding. And just the time that I get to spend with them and every day coming to work is exciting, because I know that I'm, helping them reach their dreams, and it might be a small part of that.
First of all, I don't know what the customs rules are, but I think you should require all study abroad people to bring back some salamis and cheese and some food from all their exploits for coach. It's just, a team rule.
Well, it's funny. So being a two-sport athlete, I wasn't able to take the abroad opportunity when I was in school. But one of the smartest things I've done since I've gotten here is I've befriended our basketball coaching staff. And so I've gone on 3 of their abroad trips over the years, including this past summer. We were actually in Italy for 10 days,
Wow.
done Ireland with them, and then France and Spain. And so I'm the official camera guy of Dickinson basketball, and only for international trips. But that's kind of been a highlight of my time here, is the ability to go there. And so I actually gave our Italy guys a list of things that they need to do and see before they come back. And so
That's
it's been
awesome.
fun connecting with them on
That
that.
that could go on your business card too. International photographer for the basketball team. Only
Exactly.
international though.
Exactly. Yep.
Oh, that's great because that's not because if you ever go with your own team, which it doesn't really work in baseball, you got a million responsibilities. But now you're going with that, and you get what a great experience for you. That's awesome. So we've had another glitch. This will all come out good when it's all edited, but I don't want anyone to miss any of these things you're saying. So yeah, you got to go to Ireland, to Italy, and what was the third place you went?
So our first trip was to France and Spain. So we did some time in Aix-en-Provence, and then went to Barcelona. They play about 3 games a week, and I'm the videographer. So I'm standing, on the baseline, making sure we get the angles and the wide angle and the batteries are loading and all that good stuff. But it's very minimal work for 10 days of tourist and in a different spot, and seeing all the wonders of the world.
Oh, that's tremendous. That's awesome. All right, let's get to the baseball program. I know the campus well. My son was looking at recruiting. You were kind enough to have us in and really got to see it firsthand from the field to your indoor setup, which is tremendous. But for people that have not visited, don't know, can you talk a little bit about the baseball team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with the athletic department in general. I think you hear a lot of schools talk about the importance of the athletic experience, and that's awesome and all well and good. But here we really put our money where our mouth is. We've spent over $50 million in the last decade on athletic facility upgrades. And
Mm.
so, our baseball field is down at Dickinson Park, which is the home of baseball, softball, and both soccer programs. And just down here at our location, that we redid our infield, our mound, our bullpen mounds. We added a 6 video camera system with AI, and so it cuts down and breaks down tape of
Wow.
every pitch you throw, every at bat you have, every swing you take. The soccer stadium was a brand new field this year, 2 new practice fields that are endowed by a donor who's paid enough for all the upgrades that they'll ever need. Softball had a brand new surface put in as well. Our indoor facility is a state-of-the-art $1 million indoor facility with 3 full cages, 3 half cages, pitching machines, automatic ball feeders, HitTrax, Rapsodo, a pitching lab, new locker room, new training room. I mean, it's as close to a major league clubhouse as you're going to find at any level, and especially at the Division III level. From a recruiting and player development standpoint, we're getting kids on visits that have never, wanted to come before and never been interested. And once they get here, they're working hard. They've got unlimited access to the facility. They can come down here night or day.
All right, we're struggling here. I'm working up a sweat on this one because of the tech problems. Actually, I'm in this office at my house. It's cold, got snow on the ground, so the heat's on, and this little office room gets hot, so I had to take my shirt off there. But so back to Dickinson, I don't want this to get missed because I know how special the place is in terms of what you have for overall athletic facilities, but then specifically for baseball between the field and a ridiculous indoor setup right there at Dickinson Park. I mean, neither one of us have been to every D3 setup in the country, but you got to be pretty close to being at the top in terms of what kids can do to develop.
Yeah, we're incredibly lucky to have had the donors and the parents and the friends of the program who stepped forward to allow us this opportunity. And so, I think I mentioned it earlier, but our college, you hear a lot of schools talk about the importance of the student athlete experience, and here we've spent over $50 million in the last 10 years on athletic facility upgrades. And so, just down here at Dickinson Park, which is the home for us and in softball and both soccers, new playing surface in the infield, new game mound, new bullpen mounds, 6 video camera system with AI for cutting tape, and brand new soccer stadium field, 2 practice fields, a new softball surface, a multi-million-dollar indoor facility with 3 full cages, 3 half cages, pitching machines, automatic ball feeders, HitTrax, Rapsodo, pitching lab, new locker room, new training room. So, anything we would need from a player development standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, we have access to. It's as close to a major league clubhouse as you're going to find at the Division III level. And so, our guys can come down anytime, day or night, punch in the code and fire up the machines to get work in. They can do their mobility work. They can work on flips or tees or nasty sliders from a righty or a lefty. Anything they would possibly want or need to do from a player development standpoint, they have the opportunity to do so. And so, we've seen a huge jump in the type of caliber of recruit we're getting, not only for visits, but also that are saying yes to us. And we see it in recruiting. This year, we have a talented class coming in for next year, but the kids who said no to us are going to Division I schools, and they're
Right.
not necessarily going to other Division III schools. And so we're able to kind of raise that bar and really target specifically the players that we feel like can come in and make our program better. And so we're super excited about all that this facilities that does for us. And it's the same with other sports. Football and lacrosse just got a $750,000 video scoreboard and have upgraded basketball courts and everything else. And so the commitment to athletics is really tangible here, and it's a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, no question about it. And the camera system, I keep hearing more and more about this. Is it the Aware system?
It is, yep. So the AWRE, and again, so we fired up for practices and inter squads, and obviously for our games. But there's six different cameras. There's a center field angle behind the home plate, and then two each on each dugout. That one focuses on the hitter, one focuses on the pitcher. And so, if you're a pitcher, every single pitch you throw on our field, you're getting four different angles. As a hitter, every swing you take, every at bat you take, you're getting four different angles. So, as far as mechanics and pitch location and just decision making, we can go back and clip things and show our athletes, okay, hey, this is, what's looking good, or hey, look what we need to do here mechanically to get the best out of them.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your coaching style. I mean, you strike me as a player's coach, like supporting the players' development. I'm sure you also, when need to be, if someone's not doing what they're supposed to do, and you're kind of guy that's going to put his foot down. But do you have a philosophy or key principles of the way you run the program?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm a player's coach. I believe in servant leadership, and so getting to know our guys, as young men, as outside of just being baseball players, knowing what makes them tick, what their motivations are, what's their family life like. Some guys need a kick in the butt, other guys need an arm around them, and so I know that one style of leadership isn't necessarily going to work for everyone. We've got a very well balanced coaching staff. We've got some coaches that are a little bit more direct with their messaging, and others that do a good job of really getting to know each players on an individual basis. But, I think, our guys would say, when I need to be, the loudest voice in the room and come down with an important message, I'll be that guy. But I'm going to probably maintain more of an even keel than some of my assistants might. And I think that balance is important, because when I do get angry or I need to get a point across, it means a little bit more than if I'm yelling the whole time. It's something that I've continued to work on, and I'm different now than I probably was 20 years ago. But I think just being authentic to who you are as a person goes a long way. And I think your athletes need to understand that we're consistent with our messaging, and this is what we get day in, day out.
Well said, and that definitely comes across in your style for sure. Let's talk a little bit on the recruiting front. I always kind of ask this because this is the part of recruiting that somewhat fascinates me, which is obviously, I think, you just said it. When you're losing out to some guys, if you're not getting them, they're going to D1 programs. So obviously, talent-wise, I know what you're looking for in terms of your talent. And anyone that's out there that thinks, well, I want to play D1, but if not, that's easy to play D3, has no earthly idea what D3 baseball is like in 2025, 2026. But I'm always fascinated to know how that first connection comes that you might even hear about this player. So obviously there's videos, there's emails, there's camps, there's tournaments, there's references with people. Is there a particular way that you would go about first learning about a kid that might be a fit for your program?
Yeah, so obviously we get a ton of emails and text messages and contacts from kids reaching out, and a lot of those kids are reaching out through a coach that I know and respect. Some of them are reaching out through recruiting services. But being around as long as I have been, I have friends in the business, yourself included, who
Yep.
will come up to me and say, "Hey, this is a kid you should get eyes on." And then it's our job to get eyes on him. And so, we'll hold our own events here. We'll have, a bunch of academic showcases and camps that we go to. But again, just the ability to have been here for 20 years, I've got coaching buddies at kind of every level. And so, I may call, Ryan Horney at F&M and say, "Hey, I didn't see this kid. I know you were there. What'd you think?" And he'll, say, "Hey, he's a kid we're recruiting. I think you guys should be on him too." Or he may say, "Hey, not a guy who's going to help you." Or a guy like Brian Ham, who was a college teammate of mine, who's done a wonderful job at everywhere he's been, right?
Yeah,
Amherst
everywhere.
in Eastern Connecticut, and now at Yale. One of our commits in our 2026 class was a kid who I had seen a little bit this summer, and he had seen at his Yale camp and said, "Hey, this is a guy you got to go for." And so those connections, and I trust those guys implicitly, and they call me and ask my advice too. And so it really is a small world. But there are a lot of days spent, uh, behind a backstop on a turf field in the summer for 12 hours watching academic kids coming in and out. And those academic showcases are probably the best use of our time as far as bang for our buck. We're seeing a couple hundred kids over a couple of days, all of which are academically qualified. And many of them are very, very talented, all of which who could help us be better. And then from there, we reach out to those guys, we take notes on those guys, we invite them to campus, we ask for their academic information. They pass that along to us, and not only can we get an early read from the admissions office on their admissibility, but more importantly these days is how much merit money they may qualify for academically, because we aren't a scholarship program. We can't give athletic scholarships, but Dickinson and a lot of small liberal arts colleges will reward high school students for how well they do academically. And those are athletes and non-athletes alike. And so, we can say, yes, our sticker price is X, Y, or Z, but you're going to get 30 grand a year in merit money. And that's going to take, 120K off the table for mom and dad. And now all of a sudden, we're very much in the mix for those kids where, we might not have been had we, they needed to pay full sticker price.
Yeah, and you made a great point. First of all, I didn't realize you and Ham were teammates at Middlebury. Ham's been on the podcast, and you're right, he's a great guy, and not to mention what a great relationship for you because, hey, there's maybe a kid a cup below Yale level that would be a heck of a player for you. And then here's the other thing. This is me preaching to you as like the choir, meaning there could be a kid that Ham thinks, hey, he's probably not good enough for me here at Yale, and comes to you at Dickinson, and turns out to be the kind of kid that would have been a tremendous impact player at Yale, mostly because we don't get to see kids enough in the recruiting process. You watch them over a 2-day camp, you have to make a decision, but you can't measure their work ethic and their heart and all that stuff. So, boy, just to get a kid that's in that realm, what a great resource for you.
No, exactly. And again, having played with Brian at Middlebury, and then he good.
You're the man. I love you because we're having glitches and you're being a good sport about it. I don't know. I'm going to blame it on you. You'll blame it on me. But
It's fine.
so you were talking about Ham being a great resource.
Yeah, Brian's the man, and it was a year older than me at Middlebury, and was a captain of our team and a great leader. And after he graduated, he actually worked in the admissions office for my dad for a year
Oh,
before
wow.
getting into the coaching ranks. And so we go way back, but a guy that I can call and ask for advice or bounce recruits off of. And he's obviously had success everywhere he's been. But the Ivy Leagues in general, Coach Bradley at Princeton has had me work his camp for probably 20 years at this point. When I was at Davidson and now here at Dickinson, Coach Beretti at Columbia, Coach Walkenbach when he was at Cornell. There's just a ton of great coaches that have come from the V3 ranks or know what it takes to be, a good academic, program. And so, some of those guys come in and are great right away. Other guys, it takes a couple of years for them to develop and get in the weight room, and there's some projectability there. But we kind of have to balance those guys, the instant impact guys. We may have a freshman class where we think freshman year, first day, okay, this is going to be the guy. But 2 years later, we've had 3 other guys that have put in the work and have, taken that jump and all of a sudden are key players for us as well. And so it is an inexact science. You rely on your gut a little bit, but you also need, to rely on your peers and the coaches at other programs to help you. If you haven't seen a kid, they can give you the heads up as far as what they think.
Is there anything along the way in recruiting? A kid does check out academically, he's checked out athletically, you've seen him, you like him. Is there anything along the way that would make you kind of stop and be turned off, whether it's, I don't know, bragging about other stuff or parents doing all the talking? Is there, I mean, most people are not that way. I'm just curious if there's anything in you go, "Oh, I'm not sure we're on the right kid here."
Yeah, and I think there's an important part of the recruiting process, which is to get them on campus and to interact with them, and you hear horror stories about how the parents are incredibly overbearing or whatever it is, and that's such a rare occasion. But we've had a couple of times over the years where a kid has come in and spent some time with our athletes, whether it's having a meal or eating dinner with them or going to class with them or spending the night or whatever. And they come back and they say, "Hey, coach, he doesn't really fit with what we're trying to do here." And then I don't care how good he is, because if there are character issues and our guys are saying, "Hey, I don't see it, coach," that's as important to us as anything else. And so we want this kid to be not only a great player for us, but also a great teammate and a great member of our program and our baseball family. And if that's a box that he's not checking, that tells me all I need to know, because our guys know what it takes to succeed here. And if they're getting, red flags within an hour or two of spending time with them, that can be a deciding factor for us for sure.
Totally. And when people ask me, the kids that I'm advising, hey, can you prep me on visits and stuff? And I say, basically, be yourself. Like, and hopefully that's good enough. Don't try to be anything different, because if you're trying to be different and it's not really representing you, well, then you're misguiding what the fit could potentially be. And ultimately, you're right. The value of what the players think is huge because it's their program. In fact, you could make the case it's almost more important because you've had 20 years of Dickinson baseball. They're only going to have 4 years of Dickinson baseball, and they want the right dudes in the trench with them. So their opinion matters tremendously.
Absolutely. This is their experience. I am just a steward of that experience. I'm trying to make it as positive an experience as possible. But my goal is for each one of them to graduate after 4 years, having the best 4 years of baseball they possibly could imagine, having reached all of their individual and team goals and being the best version of themselves, obviously as a baseball player, but also as a young man and a student that they can. And so if I can do that, then most of the time it works out pretty well.
All right, I got two more hopefully glitch-free questions for you here. And one is, as much as I say it, it's kind of until people experience it, it's really hard to explain to them. But I spend a lot of time educating people on how good Division III baseball is in general, how good the NESCAC is, how good the Centennial is, how good all these teams are. Over your 20 years, have you noticed a significant change in the level of play at Dickinson and in conference, et cetera?
100%. When I first got here, I remember the pitchers that were in that first class, and it was like, oh, this kid throws 81, 83, touches 85. That's, he's can throw multiple pitches for strikes. We've had guys throw 95, 96 for us. We had a young man drafted by the Red Sox who was up to 98. He actually transferred out to Lehigh, and he spent his freshman year with us. We converted him from a shortstop to a pitcher, and was up to 92 for us, and then 94 that summer, and then transferred to Lehigh and was up to 96 and then 98 and was drafted in the 12th round by the Red Sox. And he's an absolute stud for them right now and in high A. And his name is Alex Bouchard, and super proud of him. But just the caliber of athlete, Andrew Mazzoni came in and, had a couple of years that were shortened by COVID, and then went on in graduate school to go to Claremont McKenna and was the National Player of the Year at the Division III level, and 2 times a first-time All-American, averaging about 25 home runs a year. And so the caliber of kids we're getting is incredibly different than it was. But I also think, the rise of Driveline and RPP and �RESI and all these, baseball-specific fitness areas where we're unlocking velocity and performance and the tech and the science and the data that goes into it. And, our pitching coach, 𝐸𝐿, who came to us from UVA, this is his first year with the program, just the stuff he's doing with our pitchers, with mobility work and our partnership with Armored Heat and, all the stuff that our pitchers are doing, every day, even out of season with, they've each got, individual folders and so Google Drive. And so it's the tech and the science behind what we're doing has allowed athletes to become better versions of themselves. When I played, it was, okay, I'm going to, throw until my arm gets warm, and then I'm going to throw in the game, and then I'm going to ice. And that was the extent of the plyos and the body blades and the water bags and all that stuff. And so, I think you got to embrace the science behind things with also, trusting your gut as far as what you're seeing out there.
Okay, so that was perfectly said. And then to couple that in your years of coaching, we'll just even say over the 20 years at Dickinson, obviously because of the places you mentioned and the ability to develop, what are the time-tested qualities that guys have had that make them succeed? Is it habits, work ethic? Like what is there a couple of things you could say, hey, the best players that have performed here, besides being, of course, talented, what other characteristics did they have that helped them be really good? Again, starting from this is going to be a heck of an editing job by me, Coach. So I did ask you, and you were starting to roll on it of what are the qualities that the intrinsic quality, the intangible qualities, the work ethic, the characteristics. What are some of the things that, whether it was 50 years ago or now, what are the qualities that you've seen that make guys succeed?
Yeah, I think they've got to have a tireless work ethic and kind of be relentless with what they do. Relentless effort in the classroom, in the indoor facility, in practice. With their academics, with everything they do, they've got to have a passion for being great. They've got to have a quick memory, right? And we talk about, if you fail, you have to understand that's not who you are, that's who you were, and what you're able to do and bounce back. And I think they've got to just want to compete. I think the guys that compete the best typically are the guys that perform the best. And if it's pitch by pitch, at bat by at bat, whatever it is you're doing, be the best version of you. Those guys are going to have success on the field, in the classroom, and in life. And we've been fortunate to have some guys that do that really, really well at a very high level. We've had some athletes that have been unbelievably talented who don't compete very well. in their careers can be mediocre. But the guys that even may not be the most talented, the guys that show up every day with a relentless passion of being the best version of themselves, to make their teammates the best version of themselves, and to really embrace, the process of becoming the best version of themselves. Those guys are going to be successful in everything they do.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And to echo that, I think in a way, all those things you talked about, the drive lines and all the development pieces, which really are helping, the only negative of those pieces seems to be sometimes it makes a kid so self-focused on what he is doing that he thinks the only key to success is him doing the right things, as opposed to beating the dude 60 feet across to me, right? So, like, to your point, that competitiveness, if you can work your butt off and get better based on all these ways to develop, but still go out and just want to beat the other guy, I think you have the best chance to really succeed. Damn.
So if you're not a starter here and you're a guy coming off the bench, maybe you're the guy who gets the bunt down in the eighth inning or the ninth inning to give us that lead. Maybe you come in and you swipe a bag that puts you in the scoring position. You never know who's going to be the guy, under the lights at that moment. It may not be the guy who started the game. It maybe not be the guy who started the year. It may be the last guy off the bench. But every one of you has to work like you're going to be the guy in that position. And so when that moment comes, you're ready for it and you're ready to make a difference. And that guy is as important to our program as, the ace who's on the mound.
Man, I am so sorry. I don't
No, you're
know.
good.
Yeah, yeah. One of us has got us. So let's just try to do this. Let's just kind of wrap it up, and then what I'll do is I'll do a little later today. I'm going to splice it all together. I'll send you the finished version before I send it out.
And if you want me to jump back on and answer another question, I'm happy to do that if something didn't got left out that you think's important.
Oh no, I think I have enough for it. It just I've really never had this kind of glitch, and it keeps happening. It's a pain in the ass. So
Okay, yeah, not a problem.
all right, so we'll end it there. Give me some time to edit it up, and then I'll send it to you later today.
Awesome. Hey, really appreciate you. And again, if it was my tech, I apologize.
No, who
Um,
knows who? That's the thing. It's tech. Who the hell knows who it is?
but no, always, we love these opportunities to showcase the program and the school and all that stuff, and appreciate you and all you do for us.
You got it. And what I'll also do, as I've been doing, I'll do it more here, is I'll send out and post a bunch of like individual clips, which will come out really good also. But listen, to your point, when you get kids on campus, you got a hell of a shot of getting guys because of what you have there,
Yeah,
and
we're
not
super
to mention if
excited.
they're given academic money, in it, which is huge.
Yeah, we've got an arm in our freshman class who's special, and we've got some really good incoming players in next year's class. So excited about that for sure.
Awesome. All right, buddy. Hey, happy holidays, and I'll send this to you.
You as well. Thank you so
All right,
much.
you got it. Thank you all so much for listening to episode 66 of the Game Plan podcast by College Baseball Advisors. Again, I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni. For more information about my business, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Craig Hanson from Dickinson, head baseball coach. Our next interview stays in the D3 world. We go to Union College with John Muller being our next guest. Again, I'd like to remind you the podcast is made possible through the sponsorship of the Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention, which takes place January 15th to 17th, 2026 at the Mohegan Sun Casino. This is an awesome event to learn baseball, to talk baseball. You'll just be hanging around in the hallways talking about guys, listening to guys talking about bunt defense and recruiting and all kinds of neat things. I'm doing a great segment where I'm moderating a segment on the recruiting process with coaches from all different levels. You can check out all the speakers, all the vendors, all the information on their great website, baseballcoachesclinic.com. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on our next podcast. Thank you.